This is part 2 of travelling with your rats. Before I get on to temporary homes, I just need to mention something I forgot to say about the carriers, and that is they can be tricky to close them, whatever type of carrier you have, because the rats are naturally inquisitive and they're going to try and get out. So what we would do is we'd give the rats a little treat and make sure they're all sitting down before we gently close the lid. And while you're closing the lid, just constantly check that no one has got their toes or their tail or their noses, because that, you don't want to injure your rats when you're travelling. And it can be quite tricky, so you're going to have to be quick but careful, very, very careful when you close any type of travel carrier, just to make sure your rats are safe. So I just put that carrier away for now. Now, the other thing I didn't mention was, and I will add a note to the video, is you shouldn't open the carrier while you're on public transport or travelling, because even in your own car, it's very easy for rats to get spooked or to escape, and it could have tragic consequences. So really resist the urge to stroke your rat, however cute they're looking, however pleading their eyes are. It's more important to keep your rats safe and secure than to get them out and give them a cuddle. And I know people who do actually do this, and quite honestly I think it's very foolish, because even the calmest, most placid rat can actually get spooked. So just take care and be sensible with your rats. Now, what I'm going to do right now is show you the smallest type of temporary home that we would use. We actually have 3 fur-plast Mary cages. Just unclip the camera here. And no, this is the Mary cage here. Now that's the smallest type of temporary home that we would actually use. And they are very useful. If you had a car and you're travelling, you could fit one of these in your car to take to your destination. And if you've only got 2 rats, that is fine for a temporary home for a few days for your rats, or as a hospital cage. We use them for various reasons. When we're cleaning out the main cage, we also use them when we get new rats, when we're doing rat introductions while the new rats are getting used to us, and as isolation cages. When we have a new rat that comes in, we will always put them in one of these for a week, for 2 reasons. One, so they can get to know us, and secondly, so we can check they don't have any infectious diseases or mites or anything that needs treating, because prevention is always better than trying to cure an illness that spreads through your whole rat colony. If you only have 2 or 3 rats, it's not so bad. But for us, obviously, we have several cages and we don't want illnesses to spread. It can be quite costly, it can be distressing, and not good. Now, the other option you have is the Xeno 2, which is the Savic cage. Now, this is a knockdown cage. And knockdown cages are brilliant because space saving. So if you're travelling somewhere on a regular basis and you don't want the cage out all the time, say you're a student going home to visit your family, you could have one of these cages. It only comes with one shelf, one platform shelf, but you can add your own accessories, and that would be great as a temporary cage for, we've got 3 rats in there. I wouldn't really recommend more than 3 rats in there, 2 males or 3 rats as a temporary home. Like all cages, our rats come out all the time, so if you're using a smaller cage, you must get your rats out more frequently, every single day, for exercise. The other advantage of the Xeno 2 is the price of it. It's under £60, and it's available from Zooplus and Amazon. Very easy to build. I can highly recommend that as either a permanent cage or a temporary cage, but obviously get the biggest cage you can afford. Stick to good makes. Now, I'm often asked, why do you only use Savic and fur-plast? And I have mentioned quite a few times, when we first started keeping rats, we had to use other cages that were available. We didn't have internet at the time, we didn't have the choice, we had to make do with what our local pet shop had. And we've tried ones like the penine cages that we really hate, and that none of them are as strong or last as long as the Savic and the Furplast, and that is why we really stick to them. They're guaranteed non-toxic. We had a penine cage where a rat actually chewed through the bars of the cage, which shows you how flimsy some of them are, especially the cheaper ones. And the penine cages are quite often, they're smaller, they have metal grid instead of flat surfaces, which is not good for your rat's feet. So that's what I would recommend. With the Mary, we have the platform, the Savic platform and ladders, which we add in to give it extra interest. You see they're big enough to have quite a large roady tunnel there. So you can add hammocks and things and make these into really comfortable temporary homes for rats. They're also okay if you have very old rats who are not very mobile. You can have the platform quite low down and a really gentle little slope for the ladder, so it can just add a little bit of interest, because obviously if you've got old rats that have mobility problems as well, they can't manage high steep ladders and things. So that is why we do this. Now, one thing I wanted to mention about if you're travelling, it's very important to check that the little doors cannot be opened from inside. If you've got a big rat and they can give that door a shove. Now, generally on these cages, they're very strong, but this cage is an old cage and the door is slightly loose. So if we were going to use this as a travel cage, we would attach little hammock clips and make sure that that couldn't be pushed open from inside. So make that nice and secure, as you really don't want to lose your rats on the journey. The other thing that people ask me about is having a hamster cage. I personally wouldn't use a hamster cage at all. There's two reasons. One, they are smaller, that you can get some that have the same base length as this, but they're not so high. You can have others that have slightly shorter base length and they are slightly higher. But that little distance, it makes a big difference to a rat. If you have this 80 centimetre here, or just like 60 to here, you're losing this space, and that's a big space to lose if you're using this as a temporary home. It's the same thing. There's lots of hamster cages I definitely wouldn't use. They're far too flimsy. If I was using a hamster cage just for transport, I would probably look at the Savic Cami or the Savic Cambridge cage, and they're the smallest that I would actually look at. It's very important that your rat can actually stand up in the cage. You don't want them to be able to bump their head, you want them to be able to stretch out. So don't get some tall, narrow hamster cage. Get one that they can stand up in and also has a decent length so the rats can move around. So really, if you were going to use one of these as a temporary home, they're okay for 2 rats. Or if you're using it as a transport cage, you could put 4 rats in, but the same thing applies. Don't remove everything that's in there. You could have the shelf in if it was fixed, but make sure you use things like the little plastic clip-on dish that I showed you last time, and your water bottle clipped on. But I wouldn't have loose houses. I would just have the Back to Nature on the floor and a big pile of safe bed paper for your rats to cuddle up into, and just protect them from drafts and from extreme temperature and from direct sunlight when you're travelling. When you get to your destination, there's some things that you can do. Hey, there's our little Sasha. Oh no, sorry, little Bethy. Little Bethy. Hello, Beth. Oh, sorry, I made a funny noise. Sorry, Bethy. But there's some things you can do to help the transition for your rats when you actually get to your destination. One is you can take a hammock that they've used in their main home, so it smells of home. You can take some paper from the rat carrier that you've transported your rats in and put that into the base of the cage, and just do little things. Just make things as comfortable as possible. Make sure they have their favourite house to sleep in, and your rats should be fine. And just follow all the same procedures for choosing a safe place to keep your rats when you in your temporary destination. And a very important thing is to keep them away from other people's animals, because if the rats aren't used to other people's animals, they're going to get very scared. And you often find, especially if people have terrier type dogs, there are some dogs that really are going to try and get hold of your rats. So it's very important that the two things to remember is that the cage is nowhere where the dog or a cat can get to them, and that when you get your rats out, that you're in a very safe room. Check the room very carefully for safe proofing. Make sure that your family or your friends you're staying with, that their animals cannot get to your rats at all while you're having them out. And I'd be very wary about not allowing free running playtime when you're in a temporary destination. I'd be very careful about getting your rats out one at a time for cuddles. Maybe have them on a bed. Be wary of things like sofas where rats can get stuck inside, because you really don't want to have a tragedy when you're on holiday.